what I've learned and what I want to share with you today is that sometimes our symptoms, such as mood changes, weight gain, or just feeling overwhelmed, these can be very real symptoms and are very important for us to understand how weight and stress are connected together. When we start to understand these connections, things start to make sense. And also, things become more manageable for us for our day to day life. I do see a lot of my patients, and I find that a lot of times they're living under high stress, and it makes it very challenging for them to lose weight and also to balance their hormones. So it's not just challenging from a medical aspect, it needs a more holistic picture to understand. So today's goal is to give you guys that clearer picture of how mental health, hormones, and weight are all linked together and what that can mean for you and be beneficial. So with that said, let me actually share my screen. I have a small presentation before Fatma will start as well. Okay. Can you guys see the slides okay? Great, awesome.
Yes.
So So these are some of the most common concerns that women often bring up, feeling constantly tired, anxiety and low mood, weight gain or difficulty losing weight, poor sleep, and that general feeling of just being overwhelmed and not like yourself. And I want to pause here and say something very important. If you've been experiencing these, you are not alone, especially for women and for many women in our communities, balancing family, work, responsibilities, and often putting everyone else first, it's very easy to ignore these symptoms or normalize them. You might think, maybe I just need to try harder. Maybe this is just how it is now. But these symptoms are signals and they do deserve attention. One of the biggest misunderstandings in healthcare is that we treat everything separately. We treat mood as one issue, weight as another, sleep as something else. But in reality, these symptoms are deeply connected. For example, if someone is under chronic stress, their cortisol levels can stay elevated. That does affect their sleep, it increases their cravings, and often can contribute towards weight gain. If your sleep is poor, it impacts the energy, mood, and metabolism. Hormonal changes, whether related to your periods, postpartum changes, or perimenopause, can affect emotional regulation, energy, and how the body processes food. So when someone says, I feel tired, I'm gaining weight, and I feel anxious, that's not three separate problems. That's one system that's out of balance. And until we look at it that way, we often end up missing the root cause of things. This is where I think many women become frustrated with the healthcare system. Often symptoms are dismissed as normal. The focus is only on one issue. There's no long-term plan. Care often feels rushed or impersonal. For example, someone may be told, just go exercise more, or just eat less, or your labs look very normal, but they still don't feel very well. And that gap between what you're experiencing, what's being addressed, is where many women feel stuck. And that's not because you're doing something wrong. It's often because the approach is incomplete. At Crabtree Health, we try to approach this differently. Instead of separating everything, we look at the full picture. We look at hormones, metabolism, and weight, lifestyle factors like sleep and nutrition, and mental health. Because these all influence each other, for example, if we only focus on weight without addressing stress or sleep, progress is limited. If we only address mood without considering metabolic health, fatigue may persist. So our goal is not just to treat symptoms temporarily, but to understand what's driving them and create a plan that actually works for that individual. And just as important, we provide ongoing support because lasting change doesn't happen in one visit. It happens over time with guidance and adjustment. And this brings us to a really important part of this conversation, therapy. Even when we address hormones and metabolism, there are still important pieces that medical care alone cannot fully address. Things like chronic stress, emotional patterns, burnout, relationships between emotions and habits. Therapy helps patients understand their thought patterns, build coping strategies, manage stress more effectively, and create sustainable changes. And what I've seen is that when medical care and therapy are combined, the results are much more meaningful and much more lasting. Because we're not just addressing the physical side, we're addressing the whole person. So when should you consider getting help? If you're experiencing persistent fatigue, mood changes or anxiety, stress, of course, difficulty with weight despite effort, poor sleep, or just feeling unlike yourself, it's worth looking into. You don't need to wait until things become severe, and you don't have to figure everything out on your own. Getting the right guidance early can make a big difference. I have my Fatma's beautiful picture here. I got it from your website, looks nice. So I focus more on the medical and metabolic side of this topic. Now I'm really happy to introduce Fatima Vaseem, who will take this further and talk about the psychological and emotional aspect in more depth. Because truly, women's health requires both perspectives. And together, this kind of approach is what really helps people move forward in a meaningful way.
All right. Thank you, Fatma, for that introduction on your slide. I really appreciate that. Let me know if you are ready for me to switch and move forward. Yeah, you just shared your presentation. So I will. Okay. Let's see. Can everybody hear me okay? Give it a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. All right. My name is Fatma Vaseem, and I'm a psychologist in Georgia as well as North Carolina. I'm really excited to be here today. I was looking forward to this. This was decided just a few weeks ago. Dr. Iqbal approached me, and I was so happy about this collaboration because I really do believe that integrative health is not just the future, but the present. That's what we need to focus on when it comes to our mental, physical, emotional health. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm actually very, very glad that you are here, and I appreciate that on a Saturday, you're spending this time with us. That tells me that you care about you and you're willing to possibly make some changes and learn through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I have prepared a presentation, and I noticed in Dr. Iqbal, I think we're going to be echoing some of the messages that you mentioned already in your presentation. And it's a good surprise to me because, and that also tells me that we're both aligned in what we are putting forth. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen for the presentation and we'll get started. So, okay. Let me know if you can see my screen now. Everybody, give a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Yes? Okay, thank you. Awesome. And throughout this presentation, as this is being recorded, everybody knows it's being recorded. I'd like to do interactive presentation, but I know this is being recorded right now and we want to respect everyone's privacy. So what I would do, what I would invite is that if you have any questions or thoughts that come up throughout this presentation, please put that in the chat, and any questions you have, because sometimes we can forget. Maybe some slide made you think of something, you're welcome to share in the chat. Just be mindful about not sharing any confidential or private information, because there are people who you may not know in this chat, and we can't really guarantee the privacy. But please do share in chat, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll take question and answers. Go from there. So the title of my presentation, yes.
Fatma, hold on a second. Can everybody hear Fatma okay, or is it a little bit staticky?
Is it?
There is some static.
There is some static, right? Okay.
All right.
Now we can hear you good, actually.
You're good?
Yeah.
I think it might be better closer to the microphone.
Yes.
So when you're leaning in, it seems to be better.
Me? Okay.
Yes.
Is that any better? I am using my computer's mic, so let's see. Is that any better?
It seems better.
Okay, good.
There are some people who are unmuted, Dr. Iqbal.
I think that makes a difference too. So let's see. I'll wait a second until this is resolved. I'm gonna make sure everybody can hear me.
Okay, Fatma, go ahead. I muted. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right. So the topic of my presentation is From Stress to Strength, Supporting Mental Health, Body, and Balance. Okay. I want to start off with a question in just a second, but as I was preparing this presentation, there were many different topics, and each topic could be a presentation in itself. But I hope from this presentation for you is that you will walk out with some basic information about stress, anxiety, burnout, mental health, how it relates to hormones, and some tools that you can use in your personal life to take care of yourself. Okay, and this is a safe space. I invite more understanding and compassion and throughout this presentation. So first thing I want to go ahead and ask people is this, the women, have you ever felt like your mind and body may be working against you? And for example, if you feel like, it's nothing you're doing is working, or you feel overwhelmed and stuck in patterns, you can go ahead and put that in chat if it sounds like you, if you know someone who has struggled with that, that no matter what you're doing, it seems to be not working well for you. That is a very common experience, especially for us women. And just know that you're not alone, and there are tools, there's help available to understand your mind and your body and the connection between the two. I'm gonna talk about a case. It's hypothetical. It doesn't represent anybody in particular. And if there's somebody who's with that name in the audience, please know this is not about you. So this is somebody, meet Aisha, okay? Meet Aisha. This is someone, the 38-year-old woman who came in feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and disconnected from her body. It's a very common experience I see with especially women coming in to see me in therapy. Okay, she described constant fatigue despite 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night, a lot of weight gain, especially around her stomach area, midsection, high stress and irritability, feeling like nothing she was doing was working, was right. And she had tried dieting on and off, pushing herself with intense workouts, ignoring her stress, but it wasn't seem to be working. So in a nutshell, she was feeling disconnected and overwhelmed. Okay, so if you resonate with this, or if you see that in yourself or someone you know, just know that it is a common experience, but it doesn't have to stay like that. Help is available, and we're going to talk about that towards the end of this presentation. I do want to talk about stress. Okay, stress is something we all experience. It's a response to life. Stress is part of mental health. It does not exclude mental health. And we'll talk about how mental illness can be a bit different, although many people may interchangeably use that term, mental health and mental illness. I want to differentiate that. So if you think about stress, stress is a response to life. It's a normal response to life's ups and downs. We all experience that. It's a response to pressure and demands. And in general, when the one way to think about stress is that when the demands exceed the resources that you may have, that could be physical, emotional, psychological, external resources, that's when it feels overwhelming. It's usually tied to something specific. It's temporary. It comes and goes, like I said. We can still function, but it requires a bit more effort. An example would be like if, say, you're preparing for something like an exam or something tomorrow, and you're feeling stressed today. That's normal stress. It helps you function, prepare, all that kind of stuff. So stress is an overloaded system. It needs relief, regulation, and support. Very normal part of life. Mental health is on a spectrum. Stress is part of it. It is how we think, feel, and act in social situations, and exists on a range. Sometimes we are thriving in our mental health. Other times we are just trying to survive and struggle based on what's happening. It does change over time. It's dynamic, and it does include coping skills, resilience, and emotional awareness. So the question of how am I doing overall generally refers to our mental health. And our general well-being, general wellness. Okay. Now, how that differs from mental illness, as we'll see, is this: mental illness is a clinical condition, and based on the DSM-5 criteria. DSM-5 is a manual that we use to diagnose psychological disorders in psychiatry and psychology. So what mental illness essentially is, it is a clinical diagnosis. It meets that criteria over a certain period of time. Some examples are like generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. That when some stress becomes a disorder, that's when it qualifies for mental illness, not otherwise. It can persist over weeks, months, sometimes even years. People struggle with any of those diagnoses. Function is impaired both in your daily life, work, relationships. It's like you're stuck in a cycle, and it's intensified. Support is needed, usually therapy itself or therapy and medication together works best in some situations. One way to look at it, mental illness, is that your system is struggling to regulate and needs support. That's one way to look at it. How do we differentiate in a nutshell whether it's stress, just general mental health, or mental illness? One way to look at that is that stress is short-term, again, temporary, comes and goes with situations, life. Mental health is our overall baseline. How do we feel overall day to day? And mental illness is ongoing disruption that repeats. So you can ask yourself, is something you're experiencing is situational, or it's chronic or constant? Is it affecting your daily functioning? Or is this about your overall well-being or a current reaction to a situation? As mentioned before, stress is our body's survival response, and our bodies and mind both respond to stress in the environment. For example, if you're running, that would be more acute stress. Our heartbeat is fast, we're breathing heavily. That's our body's physical stress. But when stress becomes a problem is when it becomes chronic, and that's where the problems begin. Stress itself is not the enemy. Stress is essential for life, actually. We have this term good and bad stress. But it becomes chronic and consistent. That's when it starts to break down our body at the cellular level, and can lead to mental health issues, mental illness, as we will see. And we'll talk about different ways stress can show up in our bodies, in our mind. And mind and body are closely connected, as you already see. Dr. Iqbal already talked about, she's the expert in hormonal health, so she already talked about how cortisol can make a difference in our body. But cortisol is also, of course, a stress hormone, and it triggers stress if we have a lot of it in our body. Okay, and that does affect our appetite, how our body stores fat, where it stores fat, the cravings that we have. One way to look at that is through this stress cycle, okay, where let's say, I think most of us here are women, so let's say it's a cycle that many women can especially get stuck in, although it is applicable to all genders. We have stress, right? So the cortisol rises in our body, the cravings increase, sugary, salty, savory, whatever it might be. It leads to emotional eating because we're craving comfort foods when we are distressed. Sometimes we lose track of how much we're eating, especially there's some other stuff going on, right? Leads to weight gain, but not just weight gain, it also impacts us psychologically, especially women. We feel guilty at times for eating something or certain amounts of food, and then that creates more stress, and the cycle keeps repeating itself. Unless it is intervened, and there are ways to intervene that's why we're here today. We're gonna talk about that down the road. Just know that 50%, almost 50% of people who struggle with obesity report emotional eating, so it's pretty common. All right. One way stress shows up in our bodies, in our mind, is through anxiety. Anxiety is your constant thinking about what could go wrong. Mind gets stuck in that. If you notice what if, those two words trigger anxiety in anyone, almost everyone. It's that constant mental what if, as if something could be just going wrong, okay? So that is anxiety in general. That's not a disorder, but that's a state of anxiety. Stress can show up as that, chronic stress, actually, okay? There is burnout. Burnout is your emotional exhaustion, emotional overwhelm. It's physical, but it's also emotional and psychological, okay? It takes a toll on us. We feel brain fog, fatigue, overwhelmed, and especially among women, we're balancing multiple roles in our families based on our culture and background. There might be a lot on our plate. So that can also lead to burnout, trying to play different roles in our homes, in our families, not just in our workplace. And many of us women are career women working outside the home. So we can feel drained and unmotivated when it gets too much. A lot of responsibilities and expectations. So that can lead to burnout. Looking at burnout a little bit more closely next is that it's when you're running on empty, okay? So it's not your general tiredness for day to day. It's a state of chronic emotional, physical, mental exhaustion by excessive prolonged stress, okay? So the definition of burnout is such, those three components. There is that emotional exhaustion where you feel drained. You can't give any more emotionally or psychologically. There's a sense of detachment from yourself, from others, from your work and relationships. And at work or even in general in life, you feel like you're not accomplishing much. You're not living a life with purpose. You are maybe struggling with self-worth. There's that reduced sense of accomplishment and fulfillment in life. 67% of women report burnout symptoms based on statistics, and 52% of burnout leads to overeating. And people who are burnt out, it's 3 times more likely of a chance for them to develop clinical depression, okay? And if this resonates with you, that's most of us. A lot of us are burnt out for different reasons. It's one way to recognize burnout is if you get that sense of feeling that you're tired and wired. That's one way to look at that. If you feel like you're tired and wired, that could be a sign of burnout. Some early symptoms are social withdrawal, ignoring your personal needs, chronic irritability. Those are early signs of burnout. And when people, for example, the people that I see in my practice, when they come complaining about burnout, we know that from research that this is not the first time that they're feeling burnout. It starts a long time ago, especially years ago, actually. And it takes time for people to recognize that this is burnout that they're feeling. So they have been feeling it for a long time. So I'm going to offer a little strategy here. So there is a way to prevent burnout. If we can think about how we plan our day, we can plan our day in a way that if we spend 42%, so there's the 42% rule that is used among prevention of burnout. What means is that if we can we should spend about 10 hours daily to rest, recover, for example, sleep, movement, creative, play, connection. If we're not doing that, there's more chance that we're moving towards burnout. So if you can apply the 42% rule to your life, see how you're spending at least those 10 hours in the day, and scheduling some self-care and things like that, that can help prevent burnout. We're not doomed to burn out, but it can happen, of course. So the cycle of stress can look like this. That's one way of looking at it. You may see yourself here or someone you know in this cycle. It is multidirectional. One thing impacts the other. So there's chronic stress that we experience, increase in cortisol hormone in our body, in our brain. The chemicals are released. The hormones are basically chemical messengers, right? So they are not just in our body, they're also in our brain, and they impact neurotransmitters in our brain. So that's where the whole mind and body connection comes in. It can lead to cravings and overeating, leading to weight gain and body image, especially among women, although men also struggle with that, not as much as women. Leading to shame, guilt, more stress, and of course, sleep is affected. Just know that there is a biological component to that. Many of us, especially women, blame ourselves that we're doing this, it's not working, we might be doing something wrong. But just know that it's not just emotional, psychological, there is a biological basis to it. And it's not our fault. It can be interrupted with tools and things that we're, raising awareness and the tools that we're talking about here, for example. As Dr. Iqbal mentioned earlier, it is important to work with a holistic approach, and I agree with that. Breaking this cycle actually does require working with both stress or mental health or mental illness and the weight to manage weight. Not one without the other, but kind of in conjunction simultaneously. That helps. Okay. Think about, as you're looking at this in the chat, feel free to share if there is if you've noticed how stress shows up for you, whether in your mind or in your body. If you feel comfortable sharing, definitely do discuss that, because you might also see that you'll find yourself in company. It's more of a shared experience than us ourselves. Now we're gonna move into a little bit about hormones and how they impact women's bodies. Dr. Iqbal already talked about that, so she is the expert at it, but I wanted to, for my own learning, this is something new that I've been focusing on as well in my practice, to seeing that connection. So I thought I'll include some of that in here to give some basic information about what they can be like. We do have, we were sensitive to hormonal changes as women, especially. People are, but as women too. And the key hormones that are involved are cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, and insulin, and the way they increase fat storage, affect our metabolism, and impact our hunger. They all play a role in how our body feels and functions. It's physiology, okay? It's complex, but it's not complicated once you figure out a good balance of it. And this, just some basics about hormones and how that can cause issues when especially we're trying to manage our weight, not just our health, is that cortisol is a stress hormone, of course. It increases your fat storage in the midsection body, leads to sugar cravings, breaks down muscle. We know muscle is very important to manage weight, especially as we get older. But it breaks down muscle. Chronic stress affects our cells in the body. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone. It rises under stress, of course. Intense cravings can occur, high fat, high sugary foods. Leptin is a satiety hormone, the feeling of fullness, and stress and poor sleep. Chronic stress and sleep can disrupt it. And that's why sometimes we're eating, but we're not fully satisfied. Our body's still craving for food, even though we are feeling full. Insulin is your blood sugar regulator. Okay, that also impacts how we store fat and resistance to insulin. Estrogen, reproductive hormone, of course. And we all know if we have any, if we're a mom, if we have children, we can see how our bodies really go through a lot of change in hormones after giving birth. So it's real, and that impacts our metabolism, where and how our body retains the water weight, all that stuff. Weight gain can happen. And thyroid imbalance is also key. Many times people who are feeling depressed might have an imbalance of thyroid. I see that often upon assessment in my practice, and that can lead to weight gain and brain fog as well. Okay, so we talked a bit about how our hormones can impact our physical health. Moving forward to how it might be related to mental health. Okay. It does directly influence our mental health. Hormones do. It's through serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter involved in mood regulation, as well as dopamine, which is the reward neurotransmitter. So hormones can directly influence the amount or the can contribute to imbalance of that in the mind and the body. As mentioned before, they are chemical messengers that regulate our mood and energy. And stress and any fluctuations can impact how we feel. We're feeling anxious, irritable, our sleep can be off, we can feel down and depressed. Estrogen, for example, is a reproductive hormone. So based on what the research that I did for this presentation, I learned that it can have a mood stabilizing impact. And Dr. Iqbal, you can verify that as you know later on if there's any discrepancy, is that it can have a mood stabilizing effect when people who go through HRT or hormone therapy, while progesterone, which is released during menstruation and pregnancy, can have a bit of a calming impact, but for some it can be anxiety provoking. So our bodies are unique. The way it metabolizes things are unique. So it may not be the same, but they have an impact in how we function. Okay. Of course, cortisol can dysregulate mood when chronically elevated. And a way that cortisol works in our brain is that it can actually impact our brain structures. The structures that are involved, especially in memory, learning, your hippocampus, also the regulation, emotional regulation that happens in our prefrontal cortex, that can be impacted because cortisol can actually shrink the volume of those structures in our brain. Okay. It can show up as brain fog. It doesn't show up as headache and things like that, but that brain fog, belly fat, snapping at someone for no good reason. So it's something we call a cortisol trap that our body and mind can get in. So higher cortisol can impact these structures and the way they work in the brain. And because their capacity to perform is suppressed, that can also impact the levels of cortisol. These are biological. We don't have full control on it, but we can gain control through interventions, of course. Okay. Dr. Iqbal mentioned before how hormones can be especially noticeable. Hormone imbalance can be especially noticeable in phases that we go through as women in life. Of course, monthly through our menstrual cycles, that's very evident. The bloating feeling that we might have, we might be a little bit more moody, we can cry easily. Those are obvious changes that our body is experiencing in response to fluctuation of hormones. So as an example that this is it's also biological, not just psychological or emotional. Postpartum, after a woman gives birth, there's a sudden hormone drop, and there is postpartum depression many women go through. During perimenopause, which is the period before menopause, many women do experience a decline in estrogen, which leads to mood changes, brain fog, sleep issues, and of course, chronic stress, like mentioned before. Now, we all experience PMS symptoms, but if we are experiencing PMDD, which is it's a disorder, it's a severe clinical form of PMS, that's where you can also see extreme mood swings and irritability and depression. So as you'll see, there's a cycle of hormones that can impact our mood, behaviors, weight, and it's a loop. It's a stress loop. An example would be a woman feels more anxious and craves sugar before her period. It's not lack of discipline, but it is physical. There's a shift in estrogen and serotonin that's going through the body, okay? Sleep disruption, increased hunger hormones, overeating. We know if we haven't had enough sleep the night before, we're more prone to eating certain kinds of foods the next day. And later on, I'll share with you, there's we eat significantly more calories the next day if we haven't had enough sleep. And of course, that can lead to weight gain as well, as we know. So it's not just willpower. I want you to understand that it is our biology, it's our emotions, and environment plays a big role. Okay. Earlier I spoke about metabolism, how it's impacted. So metabolism is basically how our body uses energy. Okay. And then all of those things that I've talked about so far, it impacts that metabolism. It's not just as we age, our metabolism is slowing down or something we think about. Our hormones are affected. sleep, stress, muscle mass, all those things. It is a reality. Chronic stress does lead to weight gain. It has been proven in research time and time again, but it doesn't cause it directly. It causes it through our behaviors, okay, of overeating, poor sleep, low energy, some habits as well. So we don't have to blame ourselves if we're feeling stressed, but just know that we need to find a system that works for us, and that can be hard to do all alone. Mentioned earlier that when there is a struggle with stress and body and weight, many women especially can experience body image issues. There's an intense pressure for our bodies to look a certain way in the society. Unfortunately, a lot of attention is paid to how our bodies look rather than how our bodies function. That is one shift in general that we can make if we want to have a little bit more compassion for our bodies, which is the antidote to working with body image issues, is that we can look at the function of it rather than how it looks and the aesthetics, okay? But yes, that is another struggle that women have on top of everything else, that it affects their confidence, self-worth, and identity, and that affects our motivation and sometimes willingness of whatever we may be able to access to manage our health, especially weight, to the context that we're talking about today, okay? So how stress and weight shows up differently and the same among men and women. Let's look at it a bit. In women, there is emotional eating, which is a primary coping strategy. But for men, instead of food, many of them focus on alcohol, other substances, sometimes even other, like, for example, things like intense, gaming, video gaming, stuff like that. Body image is more of an internalized shame among women. Again, we're socialized, unfortunately, conditioned. We're more likely to diet. Even though in men, there's not as much of the same body image, but there is a pressure to have a certain fitness level, muscle size. Anxiety is 2 times more prevalent among women. It's often masked as busyness. Sometimes you ask people, how you been? I've been busy. I hear that a lot, but not many people acknowledge I've been stressed or I've had anxiety. It is part of the stigma. I think that is prevalent. In men, it's more like anger and irritability, and depression often shows up as anger and irritability in men compared to women. And there's the rage and withdrawal. Hormonal shifts impact both men and women in different ways. In women, there's estrogen cycles, but in men, it's testosterone. And actually, there's been studies, as I was doing this presentation, I learned that at times, sometimes increasing testosterone can help with mood. So that is something that is usually used as part of HRT. Help seeking looks different from women and men. In general, women are more likely to seek help compared to men, but they still face stigma, and it's less likely to access help. Men are. They're not socialized. It's the whole thing about boys don't cry, be strong, kind of a notion that is painted in our society. It still is there. Depression in women shows up as sadness, crying, or withdrawal, and like I said, in men, it's masked as overworking, aggression, stoicism. But what is the same is that they both experience cortisol-driven cravings, sleep issues, inflammation in the body, and the metabolism is impacted under stress. Now, this slide is a little bit heavy. I did want to mention some statistics and some reasons why we're here, why you're here, what makes it important for us to be aware of and talk about, because we want to work with our bodies and our mind, not against it. So you'll notice here that research shows that stress and emotional eating are strongly linked, especially in women. There's a relationship between higher stress and higher BMI in women. 68% of us say anxiety impacts our eating habits. 49% of women report using food to cope with stress. Many times that is the most accessible thing for people to cope with. 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies and they use dieting. And we know dieting, doesn't really work long term. More than 80% of the women gain the weight back after dieting in research. Women under high stress have 11 times higher odds of abdominal obesity, the weight around the belly. Sleep and metabolism, that's what I was talking about earlier. If we haven't had enough sleep the night before, we tend to eat 329 extra calories. based on National Institute of Health statistics. Men who sleep less than 6 hours are 55% more likely to become overweight or obese, and that disrupts hormones. In terms of men's stress and coping, 28% of men eat more when they're stressed, tend to use alcohol, like I mentioned before. Now, 1 in 8 men experience mental health issues, and that is comparable to 1 in 5 women experience a mental health problem each year. Now, that doesn't mean that there's less women are impacted less. Women generally can seek out help more than men, so that also impacts these statistics. There's a physiological impact of chronic stress, of course. In men, it causes testosterone decline, cortisol rise, fat accumulation around the belly area, which we know is a risk of heart disease. Okay. All right. Moving forward. Now, there's some common mental health conditions, and they have impact on weight management. We'll look at that briefly. Okay. Now, all of them could be a topic in and of itself for a whole presentation, but I wanted to give just some basics here and context of weight management. So you'll notice depression, for example, clinical depression, which is basically defined as persistent low mood, low interest in pleasure and things that you used to have, low energy, changes in sleep and appetite, difficulty concentrating. Okay. So 70% of people with depression have appetite weight changes, and we know that many antidepressants can also increase weight or they have a side effect of weight gain. The weight trend, people who are feeling depressed can be weight gain or loss, again, because some people, the appetite is extremely low when they're depressed, some is extremely high. And anxiety, looking at anxiety disorders like panic, anxiety disorder, PTSD. Many of the anxiety sufferers use food to self-soothe, and there is, if you imagine if your body is constantly high energy, you have symptoms like restlessness, kind of on edge, racing thoughts in your mind, rapid heartbeat. It is going to impact the weight, and initially, people there's a weight loss, then weight gain in terms of weight trend. PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, okay, it's usually develops after when someone has experienced or witnessed trauma or a shocking negative event in life that threatens their survival or somebody else's. It can include things like flashbacks and nightmares, constantly on edge, startled. So when that's the case, there is a weight trend of weight gain, especially around the stomach area. And it does increase, based on VA research, it increases the risk of obesity, okay, twice actually. Again, it is a trauma response, and when I've worked with people who have comorbid issues like an eating disorder as well as PTSD or anxiety, I mean, they complain, they talk about how they feel dissociated when they're eating. So they are eating, but their mind and body is not registering how much they're eating. They're dissociated, and that is a trauma response, for example, common with PTSD. Moving to, let's go to, binge eating disorder. Okay, that is actually that's the most common eating disorder in the US. Okay, it is classified as recurrent episodes of eating large amounts of food with a sense of loss of control, like you can't control, you're gonna keep eating. It can lead to a lot of guilt and distress, and that's one of the hallmarks of binge eating, that you feel guilt and out of control. And sometimes people will make themselves get rid of the food through purging and other behaviors. It affects 3.5% of women and 2% of men, co-occurs with depression, and the weight trend is significant weight gain, as you can probably predict. 65% of binge eating disorder sufferers are clinically overweight. Okay. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, patterns of inattention or too much attention, forgetful, can impact our daily functioning. People who have ADHD have a hard time keeping routine, structure, organizing. For example, meal planning, it can be hard. The weight trend is usually weight gain, with the cravings of sugar, reward seeking, impulsivity. 42% of adults with ADHD struggle with binge eating. And last but not least, bipolar disorder. It is related to significant weight fluctuation, which ties with the severe mood fluctuations that people experience in manic and depressive phases. There is a sense of too much energy or low energy. Sleep is very much impacted. So obesity rates are 2 to 3 times higher in people who have bipolar disorder. Okay. We talked a little bit before how stress in men looks different. I had prepared these slides in case there were, men in our group. I don't know if there are any, I can't tell, but you probably know there are probably some men in your life. So it's important to look how depression looks differently in terms of irritability, anger, withdrawal among men. Can show as overworking, avoidance, and substance use. And they're less likely to seek mental health support because of the stigma, basically. They also struggle with weight, although in different form, of course. There's pressure to be muscular, fit, all that. Stress can impact them, of course, as well. They feel distraction as a distraction to cope with stress. Right? Some statistics to put in context, they're less likely to seek therapy. There's higher rates of untreated depression among men and strongly linked to weight changes. Stress is mentioned before, 1 in 8 men experience a mental health problem each year. 40% lower likelihood of seeking professional help. They're 3 to 4 times more likely to have suicidal ideation. They have a high suicide rate than women. As I mentioned, often they don't seek out help, and 50% of them actually don't even discuss with anyone, even if they're friends. In their friend circle, they have all topics, but how they're feeling, the emotions, the F word doesn't really exist in their conversations. So they often go unnoticed and they're vulnerable. We can create a more supportive community for the men in our life, for example, or just in general, by normalizing emotional conversations, I think, encouraging healthy coping and reducing the stigma around mental health. Because strength includes asking for help. We're going to talk in a bit later towards the end of our presentation, how stigma shows up in our community, and you'll see how that is. So we're going to shift now, all in all to say, we're going to shift now into what we can do about this. What are some practical strategies to use to take care of ourselves, so that our mind and body are not really working against each other. Okay. And we can look at it from 3 different perspectives: mind, body, and faith. Okay. Those are helpful to see it through all 3 different lenses, to have an integrative approach to stress management as well. So first, we look at some mind strategies, okay? So awareness is very, very important. Sometimes we can rush to acting, like, oh, I need to take this action or that action, this activity, that activity. But if we don't have full awareness of what's really going on, it can be hard to sustain that. It really can. So it's very important to first be aware of our triggers, okay? There's a HALT acronym that we use in our practice. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It's a good, brief way to check in with yourself throughout the day, how your day is going. Am I feeling hungry? Am I feeling angry, lonely, or tired? The chances are it's one of those 4 things that is impacting your mood, okay, throughout the day. It's a quick check-in with yourself. In terms of eating, okay, we can incorporate what we call mindful eating, okay, without screens. So the awareness of food comes from mindful eating. If we can pause before eating, we ask ourselves, am I physically hungry or emotionally hungry? We have a saying in our field that people eat their feelings, especially when it comes to body image and eating disorders. So food is basically tied to people's feelings. So if we're not really aware of how we're feeling, we tend to comfort our bodies and our mind with food, okay? It's helpful to pause and also rate our hunger on a scale of 1 to 10. Again, and many times our body will also confuse hunger with thirst signals. So maybe we're dehydrated and it's not really hunger. So, but that we won't know unless we're aware of our body and our body's signals. And that happened with the pause. We need to take that. Journaling in research has proven to help with awareness. Now it says write 3 pages. You don't have to. You could even write a few sentences. I have some prompts that I'm going to share at the end that you could use to journal and raise awareness about yourself and towards wellness. You can write things like, what are you grateful for? and one, affirming truth about yourself daily. What are you proud of, what you were able to achieve and whatnot. And then there's a strategy called cognitive restructuring we use in our therapy sessions. It's basically being aware of your thoughts, whether they're rational or irrational, and how to work with irrational thoughts. We can learn to do so. One way to do so is reframing. For example, somebody might say,
मैं younger लगती हूँ.
excuse me?
I usually get that I look younger, but sometimes it can be like good and bad.
Okay, sorry, Asha, I didn't get that. Can you say that again?
Sorry, it was unmuted by accident, and I really do apologize about that. I'm just listening. I'm listening in. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, sure. All right. So yes, that's a tool we can utilize in therapy, but also just in general. It's basically replacing thoughts like I have no willpower to I am learning to care for my body well. Okay. So reframing goes a long way, but that doesn't happen if we don't have insight or awareness. Okay. And awareness breaks the cycle of stress. Body. Okay. So that was some strategies for the mind. Now let's focus on the body. We have all heard about deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing. It might sound cliche, but it really does work, helping slow the nervous system down. In one way to think about, when we have our, for especially weight issues, and you can think of it from two perspectives: one, hormone, and also nervous system. It's not a matter of willingness. So diaphragmatic breathing can actually impact our nervous system. Regulate the nervous system. And there's a way to breathe that helps. 4-7-8 breathing. You can YouTube it, Google it. You will see there's some guided breathing available there that you can practice. The key is that the exhale is longer than the inhale. That's what helps bring down that nervous system response into the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest system, rather than the stress response that's usually heightened throughout the day. It lowers cortisol. It's clinically proven to reduce anxiety by 40%, including restorative movement. So not like high intensity movement, things like walking, yoga on a consistent basis can help, of course. Walking 30 minutes daily can cut depression risk by 35% in research. Okay. Sleep is so important. Our parents are right. Our moms, when they say you need to, sleep early, go to bed early to bed early to rise, that kind of stuff. It is very, very important for our mood management, for our weight management, for our body's wellness. There is a way to practice better sleep hygiene. Sometimes that's a gap that we talk about in therapy and can improve how our hormones are impacted with good sleep. So it resets cortisol, it restores leptin, which is I think satiety hormone. 8 hours of sleep reduces next day cravings by 45%, sorry. Looking at body again in terms of eating, and I know, for example, Dr. Iqbal has certain programs that you've talked about where we can get pre-made kind of recipes and ways how you want to organize your food for your health. But some things to look at here is Mediterranean diet. It actually reduces depression risk by 33% in research. And of course, you want to avoid, as we know, processed foods with high sugar content, alcohol. It can worsen cortisol in both men and women. It's about balance, protein and fiber in general. And talking about nervous system reset, one way to do that is we can splash cold water on our face first thing in the morning. It's actually a pretty good habit to cultivate. What that does is that it engages your vagus nerve, which is your largest nerve in your body. And it communicates relaxation throughout the body when you do that. Humming has a similar effect. Humming a song, your favorite tune. No one's looking. You can do that, for example, on your own time. Gentle neck rolls, okay. 5-minute body scan. It's so important. We are not aware of how our bodies are functioning day to day. Okay. Sometimes we are going against what our bodies allow. So it's important and there's many body scan examples on YouTube you could look at on Google. It's basically bringing awareness to all parts of your bodies to notice where it might be tense or hurting or aching, or where maybe somewhere you feel full. So being aware of that. So you are aware of your body signals, whether it's hormone, hunger, like what it might be. And being aware of that helps reduce acute stress, right? In general, exercise and mindfulness reduces stress hormones, of course. Progressive muscle relaxation is another tool where you are going through your major muscles in the body, from top to bottom, bottom to up, however you want, and you're just tensing and releasing the muscles. And again, it's a mindfulness as well as relaxation combined exercise, progressive muscle relaxation. Because if your body is calm, your mind is generally calm too, and vice versa. They both work together. Okay. Pausing before eating, like I said before, is helpful. And just taking a moment, checking in with your body's signals, replacing coping instead of food with music or prayer, talking to someone can help. All right. Next part is faith. Faith is an important part of many people's lives, okay? It might be of different faiths, but it can bring a powerful source of peace, no matter what we believe in terms of faith, whether it's prayer or meditation. It can help calm our mind and create space for peace. It's an intentional time that we dedicate between ourselves and whoever the higher power might be that we believe in. And it creates connection and stillness, which is very important for us to, again, be aware of our mind and our body. So it calms the nervous system, reduces anxiety and racing thoughts, and it's grounding. Faith can be grounding. Surrendering and letting go of control, which is part of very psychological interventions, that ties well with our faith too. And it's common across many traditions and faiths. For example, the concepts of trusting in the higher power or God, acceptance, detachment. How do we relate to our thoughts? How do we relate to our experiences is very, very important. And sometimes realizing that we may not have control over something and actually bring about peace. Okay. Reducing anxiety and overthinking can happen, and of course, easing pressure and perfectionism. Gratitude practice has been well researched and documented that it can actually be more powerful in reducing depression, sometimes even more powerful than antidepressant medication. It's longer lasting. The impacts of that there are certain exercises and prompts that you can use to journal to cultivate gratitude. It's basically focusing on what is present and meaningful in your life right now. Okay, it improves mood, shifts focus away from stress, and it builds emotional resilience, being able to bounce back from difficult times in your life, sometimes even difficult emotions that we may have. Cultivating a sense of meaning and purpose is very important in life to help us live our best life, okay? And faith can help us do that as well. What is our purpose? Based on that, what we might believe that there's meaning. There's some faiths that believe that there is meaning in struggles, okay? It can reduce feelings of emptiness and increases hope and motivation. One thing that's also common across all faiths, I believe, is self-compassion. Self-compassion is going from criticizing our body, mind, and our efforts to being kind to ourselves, acknowledging that we're doing our best, especially during suffering or any sense of failure. Okay, self-compassion is the antidote to criticism, and we all have our inner critic. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's not as loud. But self-compassion goes a long way with managing our mind and our body's struggles. Part of it is acknowledging that humanity that we all share, that we all are imperfect. There's no such thing as perfection. Consistency matters more, I think, consistency and progress, and we can gauge that, and that looks different from people to people, person to person. Okay, and mindfulness is another component of self-compassion, meaning that we can notice what we're feeling in the moment, and we treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would treat a dear friend. So in a nutshell, with some self-compassion, we're trying to be our own dear friend, and that really shifts. That's also a way to reframe our struggles and the advice that we can give ourselves. Reframing can look like this, as mentioned before. I failed again too. I am learning what I need, okay, and I'm going at my own pace. Moving from strategies now, how do I know I need to seek help? That's a question that I get asked often. How will I know I need to seek therapy or go, see a physician or a, specialist that can help manage, our health. For mental health, these are some things to look for. And I've actually also designed a mental health check-in one-page worksheet. It's a non-diagnostic tool that I will share with everybody who's attended this webinar after this, that you can kind of do a little check with yourself that to see, yeah, I think it might be time for me to maybe look into some therapy or nutrition, dietitian, or go see my physician, anything like that, or psychiatrist. So emotionally and cognitively, you can look for these signs. It's overwhelming stress. You have persistent, long-lasting periods of anxiety not going away. There's hopelessness kicking in, but also helplessness can come with that as well. A sense of emptiness. You're not interested in the things that you used to do. People are also commenting like, "Hey, you're not yourself anymore." If I only had to ask one question to my clients at the beginning of our counseling or intake, I ask them, how do they feel usually, and how is that different right now? Because that can give a sense of like, okay, well, I feel like that usually, but now I'm feeling this way. So they don't feel like their usual self. Almost every other person that I've seen will say, well, that's not me. So the me, as you know, has changed. And that's obvious, not just to you, but also to people. And sometimes it's more obvious to others than it's obvious to yourself. So looking for that can help. Functioning daily is hard. Okay, maybe you are getting into like conflict with your people, with your family, friends. You're not seeing them as much because you're feeling down and depressed. There's the burnout that doesn't seem to work. Lifting. Physically, behaviorally, of course, you're noticing binge eating patterns, their severe weight gain or weight loss. I worked with somebody who they had so much anxiety that they lost 10 pounds in 1 week. They were not sleeping. They were very, very hyper aware of their surroundings. With anxiety, they lost that much weight. It was unintentional weight loss. So inability to stop stress eating, restricting foods. In anorexia, for example, the eating disorder, it can lead to that. So seeking help is a strength, not weakness. I want to echo that. Okay. But how do we seek help if we have some beliefs around seeking help? And there's a lot of stigma in our society. In some cultures, it's louder than others. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about what that can look like. And if any of this resonates with you, please do put in the chat if you've heard any of these growing up or you hear them now. Things like we may think, so these are things that get in the way of seeking help. I've learned I should be able to handle this myself. Many people feel that way. I shouldn't need help. Therapy is only for serious problems. No, therapy is not just for crisis. People enter therapy at all periods of life, all phases of life. Some people do think therapy is not going to help with weight issues. It can be a really good support, as we have looked in our presentation. Therapy is for people who are broken or weak of faith. I hear that often in my community, for example. If you could pray more, if you could, do more, volunteer work, for example, then you're not going to feel as, as weak or broken. Faith can be a good addition to coping strategies, but that's not the only coping strategy, is what I've learned. There's a fear of judgment, where people are going to think or say how, what's going on. And yes, we grew up with some cultural beliefs, like we don't want to air out our dirty laundry, secrets. There's some family secrets that are kept. But just know, if I can echo one thing here, is what I've learned is that, a sense of shame that many women feel about their bodies, that's not new. It happens in families, and it's like the body shaming is very common with people who struggle with body image and eating disorders. And a healing has to happen in a community. It's hard to do that in secret. So we have to kind of make it more acceptable to talk about these things, and we can do that by seeking help and encouraging someone to seek help. Some more common myths about mental illness and therapy is that other people have it worse. Many people compare their struggles with others, thinking, at least I'm not that bad, or at least I'm not like in the ER with suicidal thoughts, so I'm okay. Like People will say that. Talking won't help. I should already know, how to cope. So I wanna just take a second here and just see if you can reflect on if any of these resonate with you, or know of someone, who may believe certain things, because there's a very common myths about mental illness therapy and help seeking. There's a stigma around it. So if I may, I want to invite you to reframe mental health struggles, okay? Think about therapy as a source of support, not weakness, as a example of strength. Because people who come to therapy, I always tell them it is a sign of courage. It's a sign of compassion. It's an example of self-love. It's an example of self-compassion, but it's not just self-love and self-compassion. You're telling me that you are here because some loved one has also mentioned that, hey, I care about you. I want you to feel better. Can you go? So you're doing it not just for yourself, you're doing this for your loved ones. So, it is a space to process, not be fixed. I also echo that because many times people will come in to say, well, fix this, I want to change this and all that. But they don't have awareness of what's really going on. They don't have the understanding. So I personally believe, and what I promote in my practice is that therapy is a way for us to connect with ourselves without judgment, with more self-compassion. And if we are not really connecting with ourselves, our connection with others is impacted, okay? Just like physical health, mental health needs care. If somebody has a broken arm, we're not going to say, hey, we should goodbye. We're going to tell them to go seek help, okay? There's something, there. Mental health struggles, the thing with that is what also breeds stigma and less seriousness is that it's not as visible to people. Like for some people, depression is not physically visible sometimes to people. Anxiety may not be. They're very high functioning, people with high functioning anxiety and depression. There's examples like, for example, I think like Robin Williams, for example, suffered with depression and he died by suicide. Now, he made everybody laugh, right? So nobody suspected that maybe there was depression underneath, but there was. It's hard to tell. It's hard to see. A broken bone is easy to see, a bruise, but mental wounds are really hard to see, and that also gives into the stigma. Struggling is part of human, like mentioned before. Stress is part of life. Our feelings are valid. And healing takes support, not silence, okay? And we don't have to wait until it gets worse, okay? Help is available, okay? Again, studies show that therapy is more effective than dieting alone. It works in conjunction. We're focusing on integrative support and health, as mentioned before. And therapy is for people who are ready to grow, and not even ready to change, because sometimes people will come and tell me, well, I don't know if I am ready to change. It's okay. It's different stages of change people will enter counseling for. And sometimes the change they're seeking, that may not be the change that may be good for them as they get to know about what's really going on at the root. So, but they're ready to grow and they're ready to have a better relationship with themselves. So in terms of help seeking, start small, if it's hard to reach out, okay? Some self-help tools you can practice. Some of the things I mentioned today, and I'm also going to send out after this talk. Talk to someone you trust, that goes a long way. Someone who is, listening ear, Explore therapy at your own pace because you do deserve support. And you can move at your own pace with that, okay? So in a nutshell, where you can see how working integratively can look like this. So you have your therapy, you will get in touch with your mindset. You're open to okay, I think somebody is unmuted.
Fatma, can you mute them because you're the host now?
Am I? Did you? Oh, let's see. Who is it? Mute this person?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't tell which one it was. All right. So lifestyle habits and nutrition support, of course, and seeking your physician, who's a specialist in maintaining your physical well-being. Okay, this is what it can look like. And remember how I mentioned in the beginning, Aisha, so we're going to meet her again. And let's see if this is okay, I muted him again. All right, sorry about that. Okay, where is this? All right. So we're gonna So all in all, to put it all together, what we've been working on, what I've been talking about is moving from the old cycle to the new cycle. In a nutshell, the old cycle looks like this. So there's stress, we are eating emotionally, okay, there's guilt, and then there's more stress, and it just kind of keeps repeating. So new cycle looks like this. You have awareness of stress, and you are able to respond rather than react to what is going on in your mind and your body. And that impacts the levels of stress, okay? So remember I shared from the beginning. So if you look at it, what that approach can look like in a meeting for helping Aisha meet her goals, the case is like this. So remember, she is arriving exhausted and frustrated by weight gain, despite diets and workouts. So in therapy, she worked on burnout and perfectionism, for example, okay? Balanced the sugar, okay, nutrition-wise, had some hormonal support through sleep and routine, had a consistent, movement, exercise regimen. And in several months, it takes time. It takes time to build habits. Was able to sustain weight loss, improve energy, sense of calm and control, because addressing whole person is important, and she was able to look at herself as a whole person than in silo, and feeling that she's working with the body, not against it. So going from overwhelmed and disconnected, I think, to consistent and regulated. So we're working on regulation in a nutshell, as we are tending to our wellness. In terms of resources, I do want to share in all of my webinars, I like to mention resources to people that they can go out and seek out at their own will, what feels accessible to them. So these are national resources. You're welcome to tune in. I also have a document that I've prepared for you where I have listed helpful books to read, apps to use for better emotional mental health, some videos that are helpful. If we have time, we'll see a video at the end. We'll see how we're doing. I'm almost done with my presentation. And there's some other links to manage your stress. So I will send that out after the webinar. But crisis line is a national crisis line, 988, like 911. This is for emotional distress or any crisis suicidal thoughts that, it's good to be aware of. You can do a text. You can text to 988 also. It doesn't have to be just 741 741. It used to be differentiated before. There's a very good book, The Body Keeps a Score, that have by psychiatrist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he talks about how it's your nervous system and how to regulate it and how it shows up in our day-to-day stress. Finding a therapist, you can use psychologytoday.com. There's BetterHelp, Talkspace, goodtherapy.org. There's also ruh.com, ruh.com, or org. It's one of those. I think it's in the resource list that I'm going to send you. For men specifically, these are some good websites to know of. Mentherapy.org, headsupguys.org. Some digital tools, apps like Calm, Headspace. You may have heard about it. Noom is a really good one. It's based on CBT to help manage our weight and change our relationship with food. So Noom is a good one. And of course, your medical doctors and your care team, consult with them as well. A little bit about my practice. It's called Inaya Counseling and Consulting. I can see people throughout the US in 40 plus states for therapy through telehealth. You're welcome to get in touch if you think you could benefit from that. I hope that you can see from our presentation that therapy can be a good source of support regardless of what you're going through. Sometimes we're seeking some support. Sometimes we're seeking, it's a lifeline really for people. And I will have this information in the resources as well that I'll send out. And closing reflection, I want all of you to know that your mind is not broken. Your body is not the enemy. It's been carrying you through hard seasons, so we can be more understanding and compassionate towards it. Healing is also not linear. It takes time, okay? We can focus on giving ourselves grace in those difficult times. We're not going towards perfection. Again, we are progressing, focus on progress. And all of all, I do believe that we respond to stress, respond to life the way we know. And we can learn better ways. We can learn new ways. We can always change, no matter what age, what circumstance. And because we all have a right to have to be able to have the best life that we can, but that doesn't happen just alone. It takes a village, it takes the community, it takes understanding and compassion from the community that we can be the if it's not around us, we can be the trendsetter. We can be the person who talks about, hey, I just went to see my psychotherapist. Okay, it's very easy to talk about like coaches and physical therapists or doctors, but people don't openly talk about therapy and seeking support, which also further increases the stigma and the judgment. So I hope we can get to a point one day where we are able to talk about in our circles openly about how we're changing and growing with the help of therapy too, because it is essential, I believe. Because you deserve peace in your mind, balance in your body, and rest in your soul. I have some questions. I appreciate you being here today. And what I want to leave you with today is that remember not to get stuck in a moment of time for a lifetime. It can change, all right? You have the courage, you have the power to do so with some help at times. And it takes courage to seek help, and you are worth it, okay? So self-compassion, compassion for others, I believe, is incomplete without compassion for yourself. So I hope that next time that you are, and especially as women, we tend to take care of others and we're forthcoming in doing that. As you're doing that, you will also pause and think about yourself in terms of what you need, and hopefully that can help you be more present and available to your loved ones. So thank you for your attention, and I appreciate you being here today, and that's it. I don't know, Dr. Iqbal, if we have time to play that video or not. If not, we can send it to the people as well. But I can pause at this point and look at chat. I wasn't looking at chat while I was presenting, so we can see if there's any questions that people may have or comments before the video or after. You let me know what would work best.
I think we can play the video in the end, Fatma, so everybody can watch. Try to share this.
And that video, I just want to share with you. I wanted to make sure I could show you because it's a science-based 5 habits that we can cultivate. I mean, if we can repeat them because they're a habit we can learn to cultivate, it helps you reduce the stress in less than 60 seconds or in 60 seconds. Those are some immediate interventions that we can use. They are science and evidence-based that can help us in times of distress. So I wanted to make sure that we could show that, and I think you'll find it useful.
Your emotional state is not determined by what is happening around you. It is determined by what is happening inside your brain chemistry right now, and the right input changes that chemistry in minutes. Most people wait for something good to happen before they allow themselves to feel good. That wait never ends. But here is what nobody told you. You do not have to wait. Your brain has 5 specific reset switches built directly into its hardware. And in this video, I am going to show you exactly how to use all 5. The 5th one is the one I need you to stay for. Most people do the exact opposite of it every single day, and that one mistake is quietly making everything harder than it needs to be. Habit number 1, the body scan reset. The first habit that changes how you feel in minutes is a 60-second body scan reset, and it works by interrupting the stress cycle before it has a chance to fully take hold. Here is what most people do not realize about stress and anxiety. Before they become emotional experiences, they are physical ones. Stress lives in your body first. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, clenched jaw, a heavy feeling in your chest. These physical sensations come before the anxious thoughts, not after them. And when you ignore the physical signals your nervous system interprets, that ignorance as confirmation that the threat is real and escalates the response. Research in somatic psychology found that deliberately scanning your body for areas of tension and consciously releasing them interrupts the stress escalation cycle at its earliest point, before it has recruited your emotional brain into full threat response mode. You are essentially catching the fire before it spreads from a small spark into something that takes hours to put out. Here is your action right now. Close your eyes for 60 seconds. Start at the top of your head and slowly move your awareness down through your body. Your jaw, is it clenched? Release it. Your shoulders, are they raised toward your ears? Drop them. Your chest, are you breathing shallowly? Take one deep breath. Your hands, are they tight? Open them. That 60-second scan is not relaxation. It is your nervous system receiving a direct signal that the threat has passed and it is safe to return to baseline. Do this the moment you notice your mood beginning to shift downward, not after you have been stressed for an hour. The moment you feel the first sign, that is when it works best, and that is when most people never think to use it. Now, the next habit builds on this, but works through a completely different biological pathway, and this one you can do anywhere without anyone around you even noticing. Habit number 2, the extended exhale. The second habit is the extended exhale, and it is one of the most direct ways to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the biological system responsible for calm, recovery, and emotional regulation. Most people know that breathing affects how you feel. What most people do not know is that it is specifically the exhale that does the heavy lifting. Your inhale activates your sympathetic nervous system, the system associated with alertness and stress response. Your exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the system associated with calm and recovery. This means the ratio of your inhale to exhale directly determines which system is dominant in your body at any given moment. Researchers studying heart rate variability, one of the most reliable measures of nervous system health, found that extending the exhale to roughly twice the length of the inhale produced the fastest measurable shift from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic dominance of any breathing technique studied. Faster than box breathing. Faster than deep breathing alone. The extended exhale is not just calming. It is the most efficient biological switch between stress and calm that your body has. Here is your action. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Then exhale through your mouth for a count of 8. Do this 5 times in a row. That is less than 2 minutes. And by the 5th breath, your heart rate will have measurably slowed. Your cortisol will have begun to drop, and your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain, will have begun coming back online after stress pushed it partially offline. Here is the crazy part. You can do this in a meeting, in a car, in a conversation that is making you anxious. Nobody can tell you are doing it, but your nervous system absolutely can. Share this with someone who tells you they cannot control their anxiety, because this is not about controlling your mind. It is about controlling your biology, and biology responds to breath whether your mind believes it or not. Now, number 3. This one involves movement, but not in the way you think, and the science behind why it works will completely change how you think about exercise and mood. Habit number 3, the 2-minute movement burst. The third habit that changes how you feel in minutes is a 2-minute movement burst, and it works by triggering an immediate release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which neuroscientists sometimes call miracle grow for the brain. Most people think of exercise as something that improves mood over time through consistency, and that is true. But what most people miss is that even very brief, intense movement produces an immediate neurochemical response that changes how you feel within minutes of stopping, not hours later, minutes. Researchers at the University of British Columbia found that even 2 minutes of vigorous movement produced measurable increases in BDNF, dopamine, and serotonin, the 3 chemicals most directly associated with mood, motivation, and mental clarity. The effect was not as large as a full workout, but it was immediate and it was real. And for someone who is stuck in a low mood spiral, immediate and real is exactly what is needed. Here is your action. The next time your mood drops or your energy crashes, stand up. Do 2 minutes of something that gets your heart rate up. Jump in place. Do 20 jumping jacks. Walk fast up and down a hallway. Dance to one song in your kitchen with the door closed if you need to. It does not matter what it looks like. It matters that your heart rate rises and your body moves with some genuine intensity for 2 full minutes. By the time you sit back down, your brain chemistry will have measurably shifted. The heaviness will be lighter, the fog will be thinner. Not because your problems changed, but because the chemical environment your brain is operating in changed, and everything feels different when your chemistry is different. Now, number 4. This is the one that most productivity and self-improvement content completely overlooks, and it is one of the fastest emotional resets that exists. Here is a question worth sitting with for a moment. When was the last time you reached out to someone just to tell them something you genuinely appreciated about them? Not to catch up, not to make plans, just to tell them one specific thing that they did or said that actually meant something to you. For most people, the honest answer is a long time ago, and that gap is costing them more emotionally than they realize. Habit number 4, the appreciation message. The 4th habit is sending one specific appreciation message, and it works by triggering a simultaneous release of oxytocin and serotonin through the act of genuine giving. Oxytocin is your brain's connection and bonding chemical. Serotonin is your confidence and significance chemical. Both of them are triggered not just by receiving warmth and appreciation, but by giving it. Research in positive psychology found that people who wrote and sent specific appreciation messages to others reported immediate improvements in mood that lasted significantly longer than most other positive interventions studied. And the key word is specific. A generic thank you produces a mild response. A specific, genuine observation about exactly what someone did and exactly why it mattered to you produces a significantly stronger neurochemical response in both the sender and the receiver. Here is your action. Right now, before this video ends if possible, think of one person in your life who has done something in the last week that you genuinely appreciated. It does not have to be big. It does not have to be dramatic. Send them a message with 2 things: what they specifically did and exactly why it mattered to you. That is the entire formula. 2 sentences, 60 seconds, and your brain begins releasing oxytocin and serotonin the moment you press send, not when they reply. The act of giving itself starts the chemical release. This is one of the most underused emotional reset tools that exists because it looks like it is about the other person. But it works because of what it does to your own brain chemistry in the moment of genuine giving. Now, everything I have shared so far is real and it works. Each of these 4 habits produces a measurable shift in how you feel within minutes. But the 5th one, this is the one that changed how I understand emotional states entirely. And I think it is going to do the same for you. Habit number 5, the permission pause. Now, everything I have shared so far matters deeply, but this 5th habit is the one most people will resist the most, and it is also the one with the most immediate and lasting impact on how you feel from moment to moment every single day. The 5th habit that changes how you feel in minutes is what I call the permission pause, and it is this. When you are feeling bad, anxious, sad, frustrated, overwhelmed, flat, instead of immediately trying to fix it, distract from it, or push through it, you stop. You take one breath and you say to yourself, out loud or internally, "It is okay that I feel this right now." That is it. 4 words. It is okay that I feel this right now. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but the neuroscience behind it is profound. Researchers studying emotional regulation found that the single most effective way to reduce the intensity and duration of a negative emotional state is not to suppress it or distract from it, both of which actually amplify it over time, but to acknowledge it without judgment. This process is called affect labeling, and it has been studied extensively at UCLA. When you name and accept what you are feeling without fighting it, the activity in your amygdala, the brain's threat detection and emotional alarm center, measurably decreases within minutes. The emotion does not disappear immediately, but it stops escalating. It stops recruiting more of your brain into the threat response, and it begins to move through your system the way emotions were designed to, as temporary states rather than permanent conditions. Here is why most people never do this. Because accepting a negative feeling sounds like surrendering to it. It sounds like giving up. It sounds like deciding to stay in it forever. But the research shows the exact opposite is true. Fighting an emotion gives it power. Accepting it dissolves it. The people who move through difficult emotional states the fastest are not the ones with the most willpower or the most positive thinking. They are the ones who have learned to stop treating their emotions as enemies to be defeated and start treating them as signals to be heard. And the permission pause is the simplest, most immediate way to do that. Here is your action. The next time you feel something difficult rising, before you reach for your phone, before you try to logic your way out of it, before you tell yourself to just get over it, stop, breathe, say the words, "It is okay that I feel this right now." Then let whatever needs to move through you actually move. You will be surprised how quickly it does when you stop blocking the door. Save this video. These 5 habits that change how you feel in minutes are worth coming back to on every difficult day, because difficult days are not the exception. They are part of the deal. And now you have tools that actually work when you need them most.
Right, wonderful. So I just want to thank Fatma for this wonderful presentation. This was very nice. I feel like I learned myself a lot about stress, and I feel like this is some techniques that I could use in my life as well to de-stress as someone who works in the medical field. And day to day, we see patients who are struggling themselves and try to be a positive role model for them. You did an excellent job in presenting this. I cannot be thankful for the help that you're providing our community. The goal of this presentation was for our community members to really be able to seek the help that they need. So as a primary care physician, as someone who works with weight management, I do see a lot of people who are struggling every day. I have big encouragement for them to seek the help that is needed, but I do find that there's a lot of stigma in the community, particularly around this concept of seeking mental health. And so this presentation really allows us to understand how everything is connected when it is concerning hormones and weight management in particular. It's not as easy as prescribing a medication. It's about looking at the whole picture. And you did an excellent job presenting that to us. I'm really, really thankful for this information. And of course, we have recorded this session and plan to post it for the rest of our community members to see as well who couldn't join today. With that said, I would like anybody who has questions, we see some information in the chat. We'll go through that as well, but please feel free to ask any questions at this time. If I may start, Fatma, there is one question about free resources, particularly for people who cannot afford therapy. And I do think that's a very valid question because we do have people in our community who are struggling in making ends meet. And so there is a lot of mental health crisis in people in general, but particularly how they can get the help needed to be able to take care of themselves and seek the help for themselves and their loved ones.
That is, of course, a very important question. And what I can do is I can definitely share some resources that are in the community that can be free of charge. And I'm aware of more so in Georgia, locally, of what they might be. I can definitely include those too. But there need to be more of those than not. I will definitely share with them. I will research them and I'll share them. I don't know any on top of my head, unfortunately. But what I will say is that, yes, definitely having insurance helps. But in our workplaces, we have those EAP programs, the employee assistance programs, and they can help. So providers who accept EAP, they can provide counseling for free for up to like sometimes 6 to 12 sessions. And if a provider is part of the EAP panel with the workplace, that so the employee, it's free. They don't have to pay. So they can find a provider that is in panel with EAP and employee assistance program, and they can utilize those free sessions up to a certain number, and they can be renewed based on per condition or per issue that the person is seeking help for from a therapist.
Great, great,
That's one way
wonderful.
to go to get creative about seeking help because, of course, I mean, 90% of the U.S. workplace is pretty burnout, stressed. So I think it'd be important for them to have such programs, and many of them do actually, EAP programs. Others are like, for example, Talkspace online that I mentioned earlier. There's some platforms that offer like a monthly kind of a subscription program that tends to be a little bit more affordable for some people compared to self-pay if they don't have insurance. That's another way to explore that. Like Talkspace, I think, is a website. You could get affordable, rate if you don't have insurance.
Wonderful.
And sliding
Wonderful.
scale. Many providers do sliding scale actually.
Yes.
Too. So nonprofits locally, Georgia, I know about that offer counseling services, especially for let's say women who may be going through some domestic violence. Their services tailored at a specific group that they can get counseling for that if they meet the criteria. But I will, and there's one in North Carolina also. It is Kiran. It's called Kiran, Kiran. So if there's any relationship distress, and that can create a lot of mental health issues if we're living in a toxic environment at home. So they can reach out to Kiran. I think it's kiran.org. And if you are a survivor of domestic violence, for example, and experiencing trauma, you can reach out. They have counselors that offer free of charge counseling services.
Great, great. And I think we will also plan to make a resource for our community members as well, so that they can have on hand in case of a mental health crisis or if they need help, because we do see a lot of people who are seeking assistance, sometimes just from phone calls or just asking general questions. So I do think that's a very important question, and I'm glad to know that there are resources available. So a couple more questions have come in. So I think this question is more pertinent to me about checking cortisol. So Dietem and also Emily has mentioned as well, we do take insurance, and so we are limited in the lab work that we can do through insurance. But that said, we usually check AM cortisol early in the morning. Usually in the office, I will check it. And yes, I'm partnered with all the major insurances, and I think Fatma is as well. So I think that becomes important. The reason is just to make it so that it is easier for our community members to come and seek the care that they need. We provide longer times to our patients so that they can express all the main concerns that they have, particularly around weight management. So weight management, of course, hormonal therapy, particularly around perimenopause and menopause. I do basic focus on women's health. Do not do men's health at this point. I think that is something that I would work on later, but for now it's women's health mostly, and I do take over primary care if they do request it. There's a question for you as well, Fatma. How to catch myself when I feel I am slacking to get my mental state back and be able to manage the stress?
Yes, that's actually very common, and I think most of us can relate with that. And the main thing is, yes, catching ourselves, because sometimes the first thing is we have to be aware about when our energy has shifted, when our mood has shifted. So I think daily check-ins with ourselves can help with that. Because more aware you are about your body and your mind, when something is off. And little things like we talk about the stress cycle. it's important to interrupt that cycle. I think what happens is that when we are stressed, it's a loop. So, and the loop repeats itself because sometimes the stress cycle is, it doesn't get a time to finish. So it kind of has to come to fruition in a way. So, for example, like, if we're going through heightened anxiety, like anxiety response, at some point, our body itself kind of settles if we don't get in the way of it, for example, in panic. So we kind of have to interrupt that cycle either through an intervention, like that, like in the video they were talking about, you move, you move a muscle, you do some push-ups, you kind of distract your mind from the emotion to the, to the present moment. Because many times when we're stressed, in my experience and what I see with my clients is that it's not so much, it can be, but not so much. It is the current state, the present moment that is creating stress for them. It's tied to some past wound. It's tied to some past source of anxiety and worry that is still unresolved. So if we can get our mind through mindfulness, sometimes meditation, gratitude, what do I have going well for me right now, even though everything is not how it's supposed to be, there's still some things that are, it can shift that perspective in the moment. And managing stress is something that is a daily habit we can cultivate. Like for example, I when I'm teaching my clients progressive muscle relaxation or like that deep breathing, I talk to them about the importance of it, practicing that when their stress level might be at like a 3 or 4 out of 10, not when at like a 8 or 9 out of 10. Because at that moment, if we haven't practiced that before, our body doesn't recognize that exercise. It's going to be hard for it to bring it down to that parasympathetic response where we can relax and digest and calm. So we kind of build it over time and give our body and mind evidence or that information, like that muscle memory, for example, that okay, I recognize this, and I can bring myself to safety in my body or in my mind. So habits, cultivating good habits go a long way with that ongoing management. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to share with everybody who attended the webinar also. I do have a mental health check-in daily, as well as a sample coping, I'm going to pull it up, daily self-coping checklist. So the way that is organized is that we could start off with like a morning intention setting, for example, like what we may want to intend for the day, for example, or make our to-do list or something, some examples as such. What a midday pause we can cultivate, like having a snack or drinking water or giving myself permission to rest, right? A check-in about the mood, some wins that we had in the day, perhaps, and then evening wind down, like a bath or like write something that went well today. So I'm going to share that resource with everybody who attended the webinar too, so that you could just kind of reflect on that kind of daily and see how you're doing in your overall well-being. Again, raising awareness before action.
Great, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I do have one last question, and we should be done with our webinar. This is a question by Loretta. I think it's more pertinent towards myself. We're mentioning about how do hormones affect type 2 diabetes. So a great question. As a matter of fact, type 2 diabetes, again, is considered a hormonal imbalance where you are having a higher amount of insulin, and so the body is heading towards insulin resistance and is there. And insulin, unfortunately, at its higher state, is responsible for more fat storage. So as a result, it can dysregulate the hormones in a sense where elevated insulin levels also plays a part in increasing the overall testosterone in the body by decreasing some of the other hormones that affect the actual effect of free testosterone. So it is a dysregulator of the female menstrual cycle, stimulates the ovaries, and so that's where those conditions such as PCOS tends to come into play. But again, insulin, when it's on the higher side, it tends to be a fat storage hormone as opposed to something that is just helping you regulate your blood glucose. In its excess form, it is problematic. And so we do check fasting insulin and fasting blood glucose in our patients to calculate a scoring system to assess whether they are heading towards insulin resistance, and this is before they even reach the type 2 diabetic spectrum. And so basically, we are working on causing an early alarm system and saying, hey, you're heading this direction. So let's start working towards mitigating the factors that are promoting higher insulin levels and storing the fat. So that's the most important thing. Yes, please go ahead.
Welcome, everyone.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, I enjoyed the webinar. I'm so happy that I joined you. Too much information. I just want to share a little thing that's from my own experience. Sometimes we, especially with the social media now and everything going on, we hear many things, too much information, and sometimes we try to choose our own plan, and it's overwhelmed, and people share. So I love that. I enjoyed this webinar. So we can maybe have something more designed for Gadir, for me, myself, for someone else. I'm so glad that someone who is very familiar with our culture, we need something like this. I'm so glad, and I cannot wait really to come and visit you guys, because I feel like we always, if you think about therapy, you always feel like, oh yeah, I'll go, but they didn't know my culture, they didn't know my religion, they didn't know. In a way, you always going, but deep inside, you really do not believe, which is you just mentioned, believe is something. So thank you guys, and I'm so proud having this support in our community. And for everyone here in this, webinar, from my experience, it sounds very too much information. However, just focus on one thing, because sometimes if you focus on everything, you feel like, I'm tired, I don't want to do anything. My own thing that I learned from life, and I don't want to share personal things, but I'm someone who is going through a lot of responsibilities in life. But I learned one thing that I like to share with every woman: ask for help. Good woman is not a superwoman. And our culture who taught us we have to be perfect and you have to be the wonderful wife, wonderful mother. No, it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from mistakes, and it's okay, and seek for help. Start with your kids. If something, even if there's a shirt on the floor, if somebody can pick it up for you, let them do it for you. Ask for help, and from there go out and ask for more help, inshallah. And you both, Dr. Fatima, we are so proud of you, and I enjoyed the webinar, and I'm really proud having this kind of support in our community. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you sharing the feedback. We always love to help members of our community thrive, get better, and never have to see us again. And that would be great in a
Yes,
good
thank
way.
you so
Of
much.
course, always welcome to stop by and say hello. But that said, I also want to encourage people to keep updated on the website. We are getting more specialists who are wanting to do talks and are planning to give information to our community around their specialty. Of course, I am working on a monthly talk with other specialists as well. Fatma was our first one, who really, really tackled a very, very important topic in our community about mental health, which is really, it's a help that is needed by our community members. So I hope that this webinar has been very, very useful for you. And Fatma will be giving us all the resources, and I will be forwarding them to our community members.
And if I may add something, I know somebody earlier had asked about free resources. So something came to my mind. I wanted to mention that was that in universities, in counseling programs, there are students, they're interns who are under supervision. They can provide low-cost counseling from $5 to $30 per session, something like that. They're under supervision, so that can be another resource for people who don't have insurance to seek therapy. So I would also encourage looking then into I know there's in Duke University's counseling, wherever there are counseling programs, usually they have a platform where students are gaining experience under supervision, and they can provide low-cost counseling to the community. So I would also look at that as a source of support, because it doesn't have, hopefully down the road, that does not have to prevent someone from reaching out. There is help available. And I really love, what you shared about the participant shared about ask for help. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. I echo that because we're not just helping ourselves, we're helping our families that way when we are helping ourselves. And it breaks that generational cycle that we, sometimes also get stuck in, like, oh no, we have to do everything ourselves. No, we don't. And then we can be good role models first starting at home, with our kids, in the community, their neighbors. And we do influence people by what we do silently. So it's a lot of power in that. And we all need help at some point. We're more interconnected than independent or dependent. So that's I would echo that. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for echoing that on your end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And hopefully we can continue this train of having our specialists come in and talk to the community as well to continue this education. With that said, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.